Okay, so this is the part of the video where the kids with ADHD go off to watch more interesting videos and the adults stay to learn and geek over all the interesting details. So let me begin. What you just saw me make was 600 rosehead nails, which works to, on average, 30 seconds per nail. Now, this was a commission project, and normally for something like nails, I would just buy them off the shelf and sell them on again, because I'm running a business. But in this case, the client wanted something very specific head, specific length, that wasn't readily available on the shelf. But looking at the ones that I did see on the internet, they worked on an average price of about 50 pence per nail. So reducing my hand forge time to 30 seconds, well, that makes £1 per minute, £60 per hour, which isn't bad going, I don't think. And this came out of lots of development after watching other people's videos. I've seen Roy from Christ-Centered Ironworks forge nails. I've seen Torbjorn Arman make a nail header and make nails as well. And it seemed that the process took several heats, several processes, and it wasn't an efficient business, if you see what I mean, as far as making it profitable. So my methodology was to do how they would manufacture the nails in real life by using sheared stock. So what I have here, if you imagine that this section there was actually a length of steel, in this case it was 80 by 6 millimeters, and all I've done is I've sheared the edge using a hydraulic metal shears from my workplace to cut it off at a slight angle, meaning that there's a square head that is 6 millimeters by 6 millimeters, and it tapers to a flat point. Now that flat point is ideal for clinch nails, which is what these are. So why didn't I use the traditional way of making nails, using one of these, your typical nail header? And you might recognize it from my TIG welding video. This was what the tool was going to be. So the problem with this is nails kept getting stuck, or because they're very thin on the ends, when you tried to tap them out they would just bend over and it was just not working. I tried forging it from round stock as well, and I thought using the power hammer might be a good idea, but even the power hammer, because it's so thin, it loses heat so rapidly, it still wasn't doing it. So I reverse engineered how they make them in production and came to this conclusion of making the split header. So this is my split header, and you can see the abuse it's had after 600 nails. This is made from mild steel, completely mild steel. What you saw me put on it was case hardening compound. Case hardening compound leaches carbon into the very surface of the steel, making an incredible high carbon surface. So it's got this kind of like armoured shell, and it's really good for making quick, simple, cost-effective tooling that is essentially easy to repair, easy to throw away. You've not got to be precious about it. Because this was a one-off commission, making 600, it wasn't worth me investing in a massive length of, say, EN45, some high carbon steel to make it with. So case hardening compound, absolutely magical stuff, fully recommend it. And it really does work well. You put a file to it and it won't touch it. And also the hitting and hammering actually work hardens it even further. Now the welds did break a couple of times and I re-welded it together. Anyone who knows a thing or two about TIG welding will point out that I should have directed more heat energy into the thicker parts rather than the thinner parts, and I get that. I'm learning on all levels here. So how does a clinch nail work? Let's give it a demonstration, shall we? So the idea behind a clinch nail is, first you have your block of wood. This is a piece of oak, and you drill a pilot hole through it. Now normally it's used for things like door furniture and strapping and all that kind of stuff, so let's have a go with this piece of bar here. Now you need to note that the flat side of the nail, there you go, see it like that, has to go against the grain. You put it this way and it's going to want to split the grain, So you put it against the grain like so. Let's put our piece of steel on and let's hammer through this nail. There we are, looking fancy already. So let's see what's happening on the other side. You will have this protrusion. There you go. Now it's the mechanics of this part here that makes this nail so strong. And the idea is, if we just bend the end over ever so slightly, like so, maybe a little bit more. There we are. Now we're going to hammer that clinch over, and essentially that locks the nail in place, making it extremely hard for it to come back out or to wear out, making a more substantial fitting, if you like. That's how it would look on that side. And the other side, a nice decorative nail. And that, I'm not going to be able to pry that out easily. That is a massively strong fitting. Probably quicker than most other things, although you've got to pilot hole everything first. That is absolutely ideal and looks beautiful in my opinion. Now if you're going to do this yourselves using sheared material, there's something that I've had to do a little bit of research into recently because someone debated whether this was true or not, but it absolutely is. In steel, there is an elongated grain structure in the direction that it has been forged. So this bar, for example, went for a rolling mill. Therefore, the grain structure is elongated like a wood grain in this direction. When I sheared these off, it came from the end of the bar. So the grain structure actually goes in this direction, which also makes it quite prone to coming apart, which is not what you want for the clinch nail. For example, if I take this one that hasn't been through the forging process, it just snaps like so. See? Absolutely no good if you're just going to heat up the end. For a clinch nail to work properly, you've got to heat up and anneal and normalise the whole section to enable the grain structure to reset itself. If you were to take this from, say, an extruded bar, for instance, if I, instead of shearing the nails off across this way, if I was to shear off the side there, it would actually be fine. And that's what my first test piece did when I did some experimenting. I did that, I heated up just the head and it worked a treat. Tried it with another nail on the sheared the other way and it didn't work. And the reason is the elongated grain structure. Now, I'm prone to getting things, some information wrong. I know this because many people pointed out that when I did my video on the MIG welder, like a right plank, I called it a mechanical inert gas welding machine, when actually it's a metal inert gas welding machine. But anyway, so basically what I'm saying is, if there's anyone metallurgists who understand this grain structure better, to provide people with more information on that, because some very, very clever metalworkers who I know disagreed with me about it, saying that the grain structure is omnidirectional, which is true in cast products, but there's also crystalline structures and how the crystals form within the steel as well. And it all gets very complicated after that, but any input from real metallurgists, that would be ideal. Anyway, that's my findings. So let's talk a little bit more about the tool and the kind of things that I would do differently if I was to be, say, commissioned any more nails. So this will help you guys out directly from the developments that I've been making. But you saw that I drilled a hole all the way through. Now, this is the key details. For the 6mm shaft of the nail that I made, there's a 5mm hole in this end, and that's from a depth of about 10mm or so, and then the rest is 6mm across the length. And you'll notice that on the nails. So you can see with this nail here, it's bit in the top section. That's 5mm in diameter, and then it goes straight into the 6mm of shaft here. And the idea is once you've put your nail at the correct depth for the head, you whack it together and it bites it, holds it in place, because when you start putting forces on top, it's going to want to drive it through the tool, and you don't want to lose the nail. So that's a key feature for making this work. It would work better if that hole was actually square. So I believe that there was a point in which when I'm driving the nails in, that they get to a certain point and they twist. And when they twisted like that, you got a lot of flashing on the sides. Now what I had to do is tediously grind a lot of the flashing off. So to save all of that work in the future, if I had that as a square hole, it would forge it straight and it would push the material top and bottom rather than creating flashing to the sides, eliminating the flashing altogether. Now I needed to use this retainer because the hardy hole wasn't enough to hold the tool close to get. So the idea was that I made this taper, so when it was in the hardy hole of the anvil, as I forge it, it's holding it together, but it wasn't enough. Either I should have made this longer, so it would have really wedged itself in there, but then you might have had problems getting it back out again after forging the nail. So this retainer was ideal at keeping the die closed together whilst forming the head, and then you tap it off and release the nail. So to improve the performance, what I could do is make an automated clincher. So essentially a foot operated, I don't know, pneumatic system maybe, that pulls everything apart. I put the nail in, release the foot pedal, it closes it, like forging and clinching that nail in place. And then this could be like an attachment for the power hammer, and then the power hammer forms the head with like a pre-formed die for the head. Press the foot pedal again, releases the nail, drop another one in. That would make it very efficient. That if you've got the sales of selling nails, I would totally invest in making that for the power hammer. Now, those of you who have been on my Instagram page, you will have seen a post of me playing around with Arduino, which is a microcontroller switch enabling you to do things like robots and automation. Really interested in that, and I hope to do some sort of automation in this workshop at some point. You know, things like an auto forge where it will push a little spigot of metal out when it needs it, when it's sensed it to the right temperature, drops it in a die under the power hammer, say, forges it, pops it off into a bucket. That, on a basic scale, would be fantastic, and nails would be an awesome project to do that. Amazing thing about Arduino, it's really cheap. It just takes a long time to learn it. Yeah, but we'll maybe look into that at another point. Right, what else was there? Now I showed you details on my extraction system for the forge. Let me explain. I bought a little dust blower. You can see it detaches. I cut the cord so I can plug it in, don't have to leave it outside for it to get wet. So this cost me roughly 20 British pounds. Everything is in the description, by the way. Like if you want a link to buy some of this stuff yourself. If you do click on those links, a very small portion comes to me as an affiliate, which helps this channel, helps me provide more stuff like this for you. So this cost me 20 quid. I also bought a potentiometer, which is basically controls the voltage and how much juice it's using. Mainly so I could get it just right, but it doesn't need to be flat out all the time because that's wasting electricity. We're talking about efficiency here. So efficiency in what you're spending, 20 quid, 5 quid roughly for the potentiometer, and you've sorted your extraction out. There was a stainless steel pipe, and the idea is, because I've got an elbow essentially in the way that my hood works, it's very difficult for it to generate enough heat to create the draw. Now ideally I should have the chimney directly above the fire, nice and long as I can get it, and that would make everything fantastic. The problem for me to do that is this tin shed has no structural integrity when it comes to mounting chimneys on top of it. So you may not have seen it, but there's a whole frame system holding that chimney up out there, separate to the forge. So the idea is that the elbow comes in. I've not had to cut holes in my roof and create potential leaks. Therefore, it seemed like a good idea at the time, basically. The other issue is that I use coke as a fuel source. Now, coke comes from coal. And basically they take all, in the process of making coke, they take all the impurities and all the excess gases and stuff out. And as a byproduct, because the gases are useful, you have coke, and coke is a more purer form of carbon, but it will only burn when it's got oxygen directly blasted to it, which is why you need a fan on it constantly. It won't burn on its own. Now, specifically, my forge is called a side blast forge, and I did an entire video explaining why side blast forges were the best, and I fully recommend, if you want to learn anything more about side blast forges, that's the video to watch. I haven't got time to explain it all. It's water cooled, and that stops it from melting because it's very efficient. But anyway, coke, because it only burns well as oxygen, forms a very insulating layer around it, which means once it's to temperature in the core, on the outside it doesn't actually produce a lot of heat, and you need the heat to create the draw. Now, when you start your fire, all that smoke is mainly moisture in the wood, so you want to try and get rid of all that smoke, but there's no heat there really. You can throw bits of like newspaper or something inside the chimney and light that to create that draw. But for 25 quid, I've created a system that sucks it. And the system is called a Venturi. So the idea is in the chimney, you're shooting a jet of air through the chimney. And what that does is it forces all the air inside it to move and accelerate outwards. What that does is below that point, it creates a vacuum. And that's what sucks in all the smoke. I hope I explained that properly. So initially I tried it with the compressor, and it worked. It worked a treat, just sticking an airline in and shooting up, and it created draw. The only problem with that is the compressor's then kicking in every 5 minutes, trying to keep up with that flow of air that I needed. So rather than high pressure, it needed more volume to go with it, which is why I upgraded to the dust blower. So I did think to build a gas forge actually to make these, because like I said, you need to get the whole of the nail hot to get the grain structure how it needs to be. The side blast forge is very efficient. I mean, throughout that whole day of forging those nails, I used maybe a single bag of coke, which works to about 11 British pounds, which is nothing really. And it's quite easy to get to. I got the fire just right, so there was this lovely blanket of heat, and I just rest the nails on top, like a whole bunch of them. Pick them off really easy. You got a gas forge, you can't just have it open because you're losing energy, so you've got to have it closed off. You've got to open it and fish around inside, and then you've got, I haven't got a bottle, I have to get a bottle of gas. That's at least 60 quid, you know, before I've even built it. So it's another testament to the efficiency of a side blast forge. Watch that video for more details. There'll be a link somewhere. Right, what other information was there? Case hardening compound in the link. Excellent stuff. I did 3 times using that. So you heat it up to a cherry red, if you like. Give it a good soak in the case hardening compound. Once it's dropped below a certain temperature, as in it's not absorbing anymore, chuck it back in the fire. Give it a good rub with a wire brush to make sure you're getting back to fresh metal again. Keep doing it. I did that at least 3 or 4 times, and then I quenched it. And it's just mild steel, so you've got to remember that. So quenching it in water is absolutely fine. You're not going to create, it's not going to harm it. Your mild steel, when you quench it, is still relatively soft. It's just got this super hard layer. And you imagine something, it creates almost like a laminate of material. You know how laminates are so strong. You've got super hard outer shell, nice soft core. It's not going to shatter or break. It's ideal. What they commonly use it for is for making gears. So when you're milling, machining a gear, you need it soft to be able to work it. So it's a cheap way of making gears, basically. So you mill out these gears out of relatively softer steel, and then you put it in a box, if you like, full of case hardening compound, leave it in an oven for a good long time, and then you take it out and it's got this super hard wear resistant layer. And it's cheap as well, it's absolute magical stuff. And so now finally something to look forward to. I've developed a Stag Sculpture. This is the clay model before the steel one, and I'll be releasing the patterns for all you lovely people to make it. So that is coming real soon. Happy forging a life worth living. Leave me comments if you found this interesting or want to find out more on other kind of things. It really helps grow this channel if you subscribe and like it and all that kind of stuff. Subscribing's free as well if you're an old guy and you don't know what YouTube is. And there's lots of exciting stuff on its way. Just trying to get time to do it. But with your help, we can make it happen. Yeah! See you later. Bye-bye.